Myself, Dr. Jineshwar Eligoda, Head of Department and Professor, Department of Anatomy, Gulabra Patil Homeopathic Medical College. Today we are going to study the specimen of the head, neck, face. In this medial surface of the brain, nose, and we are going to cover the neck region. So that maximum part we are going to highlight that is the medial surface of the cerebrum, cerebellum, and nose region and neck region. So today I am going to cover with this specimen, that is the sagittal section of brain and head, neck, face. This is a specimen which is we are going to get. This is a sagittal section of the head, neck region and sagittal section of the brain. So in this, what are the structure we are going to see in this specimen? That is a very important. So first of all the medical students who should know the following points. When you see the sagittal section of this brain, your brain and nose region and neck region, in that you have to first know the outermost, which is a covering we are going to have, that is a scalp. So this will be consisting of the occipitofrontalis muscle, skin and hair cells. So all we are going to get in the that is a scalp. Then immediately below the scalp we are going to get the cranium, and this cranium we are going to call a skull bone, which is covering the outermost covering of the brain. So brain is covered by the first, which is a skull bone. Then below that immediately we are going to get as a that is a meninges. So covering of the brain, this covering of the brain we are going to call as a meninges. In this you have to remember from the outermost to the inside how the skull is covered. First outermost is a scalp, then we have the cranial bone, that is a skull bones, which are you are going to get covering on that outer surface. Below this we are going to have there is a covering of the brain, and this covering of the brain is called as a meninges. This meninges, like other coverings we have in our body organs, having like we have the pericardium that covers the heart, pleura covers the lung, peritoneum covering the abdominal organ. Like that we are going to get the meninges, which is covers the covering of the brain. This is consist of the three layers we are going to have. From outside to the inside we are going to get the dura mater, arachnoid and pia mater. So three layers we are going to have, that is the dura, arachnoid and pia. All these we are going to get in the that is the layers of the meninges. Next, which is we are going to get immediately below, that is we are going to get the medial surface of the brain. That is this is all medial surface of the cerebrum, and this is the cerebellum. So medial surface of the cerebrum, which is consist of the, again we are going to get the fold like, and this is fold which is sickle like covering, meningeal fold. We are going to get the falx cerebri. That is we are going to get, this is a covers like here in this specimen. You can remember in the other specimen, this is one which is you can see the total sickle shape, that is called as a falx cerebri, and this is a sickle shape separating the two hemispheres of the cerebrum. So that is we have to remember about the sickle shape, meningeal covering, that is we call as a falx cerebri, which separates the cerebrum and cerebellum. This cerebrum and cerebellum are separated by the meningeal fold, that is we call tentorium cerebelli. Tentorium cerebelli, which is a meningeal fold which separates that is the cerebrum from the cerebellum, and this is called as the tentorium cerebelli, and this is a falx cerebri. So this is all about the meninges, which is you are going to get it. So next you have to see this is all is the medial surface of the cerebrum, and next to that, which is we are going to have here is this is the one which is known as a corpus callosum. This is a corpus callosum, which is having the parts like we are going to get the rostrum, genu, trunk and splenium. So this is the one which is a part which is corpus callosum, which is having the rostrum, genu, trunk and splenium, These are the four parts of the, that is we are going to get the in the corpus callosum. Next, below this, which is we are going to have the cavity. This is known as a lateral ventricle, which is, you can see, this is a lateral ventricle. So below this corpus callosum, we have the cavity, that is a lateral ventricle. Then area which is you are going to see, this is a third ventricle. Then which is connects to the most posteriorly one more ventricle we are going to get. This is a more one ventricle which is you get, that is a fourth ventricle. So we have this is a lateral ventricle, area of the third ventricle, and this is a fourth ventricle. So that this is a corpus callosum having the four part. That is we are going to get all four parts, you have to remember. That is a rostrum, genu, trunk and splenium. Below that we have this is cavity, lateral ventricle. There are two ventricles, lateral ventricle, right and left lateral ventricle. And this is the one which is a part which is known as a fornix. This is called as a fornix. As you see this part enlarged, this is known as a fornix. Then afterwards you have the here third ventricle. So also we consist the thalamic adhesion or thalamus and hypothalamus. This is the region which is covers the thalamus, and this is a hypothalamus. Then next, whatever the fourth ventricle which is we are going to get behind the brainstem, in front of the cerebellum. In front of the cerebellum, behind the brainstem, midbrain, pons, medulla, there is a cavity known as that is a fourth ventricle. So this is a two lateral ventricle, third ventricle, and we are going to get the fourth ventricle. Whatever the CSF, cerebrospinal fluid, which is produced in that is a choroid plexus of the lateral ventricle, where the choroid plexus of the lateral ventricle produce, and it is comes into that is a third ventricle. By here we have the interventricular foramen. From the interventricular foramen, it enters into the third ventricle. In the third ventricle, from the third ventricle, CSF enters into the fourth ventricle, and this fourth ventricle, it comes through the cerebral aqueduct. This is which is known as a cerebral aqueduct, brings that is connecting the third ventricle to the fourth ventricle. CSF comes from the third ventricle, passing through the cerebral aqueduct, it enters into that is a fourth ventricle. So this is it goes in the fourth ventricle. We are having the central foramen and lateral foramen. We are going to have here one part which is the lateral foramens are two. They are the foramina luschka. It is called foramina luschka in the lateral foramen in the fourth ventricle. Median foramen, that is a foramina mesendi. It can be in the like this way in the subarachnoid space, that is we call as foramina mesendi. So in the fourth ventricle we have the lateral foramen 2, foramina luschka, and median foramen, that is a foramina mesendi, passes the CSF around the subarachnoid space of that is in the spinal cord, around the spinal cord and around the brain. So this is briefly about the lateral ventricle, third ventricle, fourth ventricle, how the circulation of CSF occurs, and what are the foramina, what are the duct connecting to all these lateral and the third and fourth ventricle. So that you have to remember, lateral ventricle connects the interventricular foramen, that is CSF brings, and it comes into the third ventricle. From the third, it enters into the cerebral aqueduct, passing into the fourth ventricle. From the fourth ventricle, that is the foramina luschka and foramina mesendi. They are the foramens which carries the CSF around the subarachnoid space. Then after this, what I have told, this is a cut section where you can see that this is a fornix. This is a fornix we call, and area of the third ventricle, and here we have the optic chiasma. So this is the one which is optic chiasma. You have to remember there is an optic chiasma we call. Then below this we are going to get this is a sella turcica of sphenoid bone where the pituitary gland is situated. That is a hypophysis cerebri which is situated below the optic chiasma as it is in the sella turcica of sphenoid bone. This is a sphenoid sinus in the sphenoid bone, sella turcica. This is a gland which is situated, that is a pituitary gland. So you can understand here we have the third ventricle region. Here we are going to get the thalamus and the thalamic adhesion, and this is a hypothalamus. Then I have told the optic chiasma, and at the below that we have that is the hypophysis cerebri or the pituitary gland. So this is all about you have to remember on the anterior aspect. Then going to the other part, which is I have told this is we are going to get cerebellum and cerebrum. So in this we have this is the one part which is we called as a brain stem. So brain stem includes this is the part which is we call this area is called as a midbrain. This is the one called as a midbrain, and this part is called as a pons, and this part is we call as a medulla. So midbrain, pons and medulla, it will be continuing as a spinal cord. This is a spinal cord. The meninges which is covers the spinal cord, that is we call as a spinal meninges, which is enters that is a spinal cord we call. So this is all parts of the sagittal section of the brain. So one thing, when this lateral ventricle it is closed, that is the one it is opened where dissected part, that lateral ventricle is openly seen here. But this specimen here we are going to get as this is a closed, and this is a closed lateral ventricle partition, a partition between the two lateral ventricle, that is we are going to call as a septum pellucidum, and this is known as a septum pellucidum, which is a partition between the two lateral ventricle. So that you can see the all corpus callosum. Below that you are going to, this is a cavity inside, this is a lateral ventricle, and that is covered here, that is totally by the septum pellucidum. So you have the optic chiasma here, hypophysis cerebri you are going to get. So all this is the midbrain, and here we have the pons, and this is a medulla, and this is a spinal cord. Here you can see this, that is a fourth ventricle. This is the one which is you are going to get the fourth ventricle, and we have this is a cerebellum. So this is a falx cerebri as I have told you. So going to the next part, that is we are going to cover the other parts, which is we are going to see in this sagittal section of this specimen, head neck space. As you have to see I have mentioned the sella turcica of sphenoid bone, that is your important bone which is you are going to get, and here sella turcica of sphenoid bone, there the pituitary gland is situated. So this is a sphenoidal sinus, and this is a frontal sinus. You are going to get this frontal air sinus, we are going to get the frontal bone, and sphenoidal air sinus in the sphenoid bone. Also these all are the examples of the nemetic type of bone. Nemetic type of bone. So that nemetic bone are ethmoidal bone also, and frontal bone as frontal sinus, and ethmoidal, that is a sphenoidal sinus, and including the ethmoid. So this is which is a nasal septum, nasal section, which is a lateral wall we are going to get. Then this is we call as a lateral wall of the nose. So you can see other specimen which is in this. You have to see that is this partition is removed. Then you are going to get the superior middle and inferior concha in the nasal region. This is the nose we are going to get. In this we have the superior middle inferior concha. So these are the which is we are going to get in the superior middle inferior concha below this partition or below this dissecting. So that is you are going to get it. So this is a painted specimen which is to identify the meninges very easily, cranium and corpus callosum, lateral ventricle, and midbrain, pons, medulla and spinal cord. And these are the vertebrae, body of the cervical vertebrae. So this is which is you can easily identify, that is the cerebellum, and this is a sulci and gyri. We are going to get the sulci are the depressed part of the brain, gyri are the elevated part. So sulci and gyri highlight, corpus callosum highlighting, and optic chiasma and hypophysis cerebri. So posteriorly we are going to get the pineal gland, which is, you have to remember, pineal gland on the posteriorly. On this, which is, we get the pineal gland, and anteriorly we have the optic chiasma and hypophysis cerebri. Even you can have the mammillary body also, but we are not getting here. So you can remember optic chiasma, hypophysis cerebri, anterior towards the anterior commissure, and posteriorly we have the pineal gland. So this is area where you can see the pineal, that is a gland, and this is a fourth ventricle. So this is all consist of the brainstem, midbrain pons, and we are medulla and spinal cord. So that is you are going to see, this is a painted specimen, which is, you can see the totally brain, medial surface of the brain. Then next, going to the other part, that is the other section below the nose, what we are going to see is, that is you have to mention the here after the nose, or here the part area which is we call as the nasopharynx, and we are going to get the oropharynx and laryngopharynx. So this part which is we call as a laryngopharynx. So in this you have this is a hard palate. This is the area which is known as a hard palate, and this is a soft palate. Soft palate, and this is a hard palate, and above which is you are going to get the nasal cavity. Then this is a section of the tongue. You are going to get the tongue, and this is a mandible. So mandible, tongue, this is a hard palate, and this is a soft palate. Then going to the laryngopharynx, this is a which is you call as an epiglottic. This is the one which is, you can see this is a epiglottis or the epiglottic. So this is a cavity which is, you are going to explain here, that is a trachea. You are going to get, this is a trachea, which is, you are going to get trachea, upper part of the trachea where you are going to get the larynx, and this is which we have we are going to get that is a thyroid cartilage, epiglottic, and cricoid cartilage. Cricoid, thyroid, epiglottic, three unpaired cartilages of the larynx, and this is which is interior of the larynx, that you can see the interior lining mucous membrane, that is we call as we call as larynx or laryngeal, that is a cavity, and these are the vocal cords. Vocal cords, epiglottis, and cavity of the larynx, and these are the cartilages like a thyroid and cricoid and epiglottic. So these all are, you have to remember in that is a laryngeal cavity. Then one more, behind the larynx, this area behind the larynx, we are going to have there is a laryngopharynx. Laryngopharynx, which is the upper part of the esophagus, whereas you can see this esophagus, which is we are going to enter. This is the one which is the area which is we call as an esophagus. So this is the one part which is, you can remember, this is the one which is the esophagus. This is a part which is, you can that is the esophagus, you can see. So this is the one, otherwise you can trace, this is the one which is we are entering into that is which is we call as an esophagus, and we are in the laryngopharynx. So this is the laryngopharynx part which is continuous below esophagus, and the upper part of the trachea we are going to get as that is the laryngeal cavity and larynx. So the epiglottis, you have to remember, interior of the larynx, and this is one which is we call as tongue, mandible, this is the hard palate, and this is a soft palate. These are the cervical vertebrae. You are going to get, these are the cervical vertebrae, and here we get the vertebral canal. This vertebral canal consists of you are going to get this is a spinal cord. So you can see the spinal cord which is in this region. You can remember that is the spinal cord. So in the vertebral canal, it contains the spinal cord. So this is all about the things you have to remember in the sagittal section of the brain, that is a region at the head, neck, and face. So all these regions you have to remember. So with this specimen comparing, you have to remember whatever this is the falx cerebri. Here in this specimen, you can see very well the falx cerebri in this specimen. Then you have to remember tentorium cerebelli, that you have to remember, and septum pellucidum, that is a partition between the two lateral ventricle. So this is a very important, and blood vessels which are entering here, they are the blood supplying to the brain. So we have the blood supply to the brain is by the circle of Willis, and this circle of Willis, which is formed by the vertebral artery forming the basilar artery. Basilar artery comes at the base of the brain, forming the circle around the base of the brain, that is by the joining with the anterior cerebral artery, middle and posterior cerebral artery. Posterior, middle and anterior cerebral artery, they combine at the base of the brain. They make the circle around the base of the brain and supplying the blood supply to the brain. That is we call circle around and near the base of the brain is called as a circle of Willis, and that is formed by the anterior cerebral artery, middle cerebral artery, posterior cerebral artery and basilar artery. And basilar artery is formed by the, we are going to get the basilar artery is formed by the two vertebral artery joining together, they form the basilar artery. So this is all about the, you have to see in the, that is in this specimen. Specifically this is shown, that is a section where falx cerebri and septum pellucidum, that you have to remember. So this is all sagittal section. You can see nasal cavity of the region. This is a oral cavity which is representing the hard palate and soft palate and tongue, and this is a mandible. So nasal cavity, frontal air sinus, and you are going to, I have shown the that is a sphenoidal bone. So this is all about the sagittal section of the head, neck, brain. Also you have to get the sagittal section of this. So choroid plexus are present inside the lateral ventricle. There the formation of CSF takes place. Inside this we are going to get the spring-like, which is inside. We are going to get the, that is a choroid plexus, where the CSF is, that is a CSF is formed. So that is you have to remember. So tentorium cerebelli, this is a dissected part, medial surface of the cerebrum you are going to get, and this is a cerebellum. So in this relation, the fourth ventricle is situated, that is behind the midbrain pons medulla and in front of the cerebellum. That is a fourth ventricle you have to remember. This is which is you are going to get the, that is a rhomboid in shape, that is you get two lateral ventricles we are going to get, one third ventricle and one fourth ventricle, and these two lateral third and fourth ventricle, they are called as ventricles of the brain, and they are filled with the CSF, and CSF which is acts as a cushion for the brain. So brain is protected by how many layers? First one, outermost covering is scalp, then brain is protected by the skull bone, then it is protected by the meninges. Those all we have the three layers, that is dura, arachnoid and pia, that is all these bone, and we have the meninges, they all outermost skin, bone, meninges, all they are protects the brain. Brain is a very delicate organ which is protected and cushioned by the CSF. So whatever the CSF is filled in the ventricles, and that will acts like a cushion, and that is a very important function of the cerebrospinal fluid. So with this, I hope that is you have understood the sagittal section of the medial surface of the cerebrum, cerebellum, what are the important parts which are you are going to get. So that is you have come across the, what is the corpus callosum. This is the only part which is connects the two hemisphere, medial surface of the two hemispheres of the cerebrum are connected at the corpus callosum, and remaining all are covered in between the sickle shape. It is covered by the falx cerebri, cerebrum, cerebellum separated by the tentorium cerebelli. All these are you have to remember, and these are the air sinuses, you know, frontal and sphenoidal. So this is all about the explanation of the medial surface of the brain, which consists that is we can call as a sagittal section of the brain, which is consisting the medial surface of the cerebrum, falx cerebri, corpus callosum, lateral ventricle, third ventricle, fourth ventricle, cerebral aqueduct, thalamus, thalamic adhesion, hypothalamus. Then this is a we call as a that is a optic chiasma we are going to get, and hypophysis cerebri, midbrain, pons. This much is the medulla, and this is a we call as a spinal cord. Then we have to remember body of the cervical vertebrae, nasal region, nasal cavity, nasopharynx, oropharynx, tongue, mandible, epiglottis. We have this is a thyroid cartilage, cricoid cartilage, laryngeal cavity, and this is the one which is we call as a esophagus, which is laryngopharynx will continue as a downwards esophagus. That is a part you have to remember. So this is all about the sections which you come across. This is the one which is we have studied, that is painted to make the more clear idea of the identification of the brain structure. This has been done, and we are going to get as a midbrain, pons, medulla. These all are painted. So you can highlight it with the frontal sinus, you can see very prominent, and sphenoidal sinus. This specimen, we have to highlight the medial surface of the cerebellum, and what are the structures you are going to get in this specimen. Then one more sagittal section in this, which is you are going to study this is a falx cerebri, and here we have the tentorium cerebelli, that is you have to get it, and this is which is a partition separating between the two lateral ventricles. This two lateral ventricle, this is septum pellucidum. So septum pellucidum and falx cerebri, tentorium cerebelli. For this specimen is very well you can see and identify. So all these are the parts which is you should know, that is the sagittal section of the brain, or the medial surface of the cerebellum, and very important fourth ventricle, lateral ventricle, third ventricle. This is the one which is third ventricle, lateral, and this is the fourth ventricle. So one connecting part which is you are going to get, that is which is you get in that is the one part which is you are going to get, that is this is the one which is you get as a third ventricle. So this is a part which is cerebral aqueduct. This is cerebral aqueduct connecting the third ventricle, and this is a interventricular foramen. So you are going to get the two lateral ventricle, interventricular foramen, third ventricle, and this is cerebral aqueduct, and this is a fourth ventricle. So fourth ventricle is a rhomboid in shape, situated in front of in front of the cerebellum, and behind the brainstem, midbrain, pons, and medulla. So with this we have covered the sagittal section of brain, and that is a nasal region, oral region, that this we can use as that is sagittal section of head, neck, face, and brain.
Start.
So I hope that my dear students, they will understand the specimen of the sagittal section of the brain. So with these all three sections, sagittal section of the head, neck, face, we have understood what are the parts of the medial surface of the brain, and what are the coverings of the brain meninges. Then what are the sections which we are going to see the structures in the nasal region, oral region, including the esophagus and trachea. And most important, we have studied the ventricle system of the brain, and important thalamus, hypothalamus, corpus callosum, and folds of the meninges. So with this we have covered almost all the brain parts with these all three specimens.